I found out that my husband has spent all our savings and hasn't saved anything while I've been covering major expenses. My husband, 26 male, and I, 27 female, have been married for almost 2 years. Tonight, we had the worst fight we've ever had, and I'm seriously considering spending some time apart. We're both hardworking and financially stable, probably considered upper middle or upper class for our age. We paid for our wedding ourselves, and 4 years ago, we bought and renovated our own home. Money has never really been an issue in our relationship until recently. One of the reasons we've done so well is because we've always been diligent about saving. When we were aggressively saving for our wedding and home, we put away 30% of every paycheck. After the wedding, we agreed to a more manageable 20% savings rate to build up our emergency fund and plan for the future, kids, a new house, a new car, etc. I've stuck to that commitment. In fact, when my husband's car died unexpectedly, I covered the full cost of a replacement without needing a car payment. When our HVAC system failed, I paid for that too. Despite these big expenses, I've still managed to keep up my savings and have a solid emergency fund. Tonight, I found out my husband has saved nothing. We've always had a system. His steady paycheck covers our monthly bills, and since I freelance, my income goes toward bigger expenses like student loan payments and unexpected costs. It's worked well, or so I thought. When I asked him why he hasn't saved anything, his excuse was that he's always paying off the credit card, which, for the record, only he uses. I went through our budget, and based on his income, he should have at least $3,000 left over every month after covering expenses. So I asked, where is that money going? He had no answer. So I checked his statements, and what I found was infuriating. Nothing that suggests cheating, gambling, or anything extreme, but reckless, obscene spending. We've had serious conversations about his spending before, and almost a year ago, I made it very clear that he needed to stick to our financial plan. Not only did he break that promise, but he's also somehow spent more than he earns, dipping into our savings. I'm ambitious and goal-driven. I dream big, and we've always talked about our future, where we see ourselves in 5 or 10 years. He's been especially eager to start trying for a baby, and while I've been on the fence, I recently came around to the idea. Until tonight, when I realized we have almost no savings. Now, the timeline for having a child. Delayed. The plan to move out of a town we both hate? Out the window. I feel completely blindsided and betrayed. He's made multiple promises he hasn't kept, and when I confronted him, his solution was to put half of his yearly bonus into savings, even though we already agreed that bonus would go toward paying off his massive student loans. At this point, I don't just feel disappointed, I feel disrespected. I don't understand why he went behind my back like this or why he thought I wouldn't notice. I've lost so much trust in him, and I don't know how to move forward from here. Would time apart help? Can trust even be rebuilt after something like this? I'm at a complete loss. TLDR. My husband, 26 million, and I, 27 female, have always prioritized saving for our future, but tonight I discovered he has saved nothing while I've been covering major expenses. He makes enough to save at least $3,000 a month, but instead, he's been recklessly spending and even dipping into our savings. This isn't the first time we've had this issue, and I feel completely betrayed. Our future plans, having a baby, moving, are now on hold. I don't know if I can trust him anymore and am considering time apart. Where do I go from here? Update. I wanted to come back and give an update since a lot of people had strong opinions about this. First off, my husband is not some reckless mooch, and this isn't a case of me supporting him while he blows through money. He actually covers most of our monthly bills, while I handle the bigger but less frequent expenses like quarterly and annual payments. That setup works for us since my income isn't the same every month. He's also an incredibly generous person. He loves picking up the tab for friends, buying gifts just to make people smile, and always putting others first. That generosity is one of the things I love most about him, but when you aren't keeping track, it adds up fast. And for those assuming I don't make real money because I run my own business and do freelance work, this is my first year going full-time instead of working a 9 to 5 and then grinding on my business at night. I wouldn't have had the courage to do that without him, and I never would have made the leap if I didn't have a partner with a steady paycheck, even though my business has been doing really well. That said, I know I've failed as a partner too. He wasn't upfront with me when he started struggling to pay off his credit cards, and while he absolutely should have told me, I should have checked in more too. I thought he was spending the way he was because he was still able to while keeping up with our savings. Instead, he was dipping into our savings to cover his credit cards, and instead of telling me, he tried to handle it himself. He knows that's not okay, but I also need to make sure he feels comfortable coming to me before things get to this point again. To clear up a few things. No, he is not trying to trap me with a baby. We both want kids. It's just about timing. No, I am not unemployed. I run a successful business and do freelance work. Just because I don't get paid on a bi-weekly schedule doesn't mean I don't make good money. Yes, small purchases add up fast. Lunches out, spotting friends, video games, gifts for family, random Amazon orders. It all snowballed into $3,000 a month before he even realized what was happening. Moving forward, we agreed to close most of his credit cards, put his full paycheck into our joint account instead of just half so we both have visibility on spending, and stick to a firm budget that still gives him personal spending money. We haven't decided yet if we'll fully merge everything, but we are going to be a lot more open and accountable with each other. At the end of the day, this isn't a deal breaker for me. I love my husband and I know he loves me. We both want this to work, and we are both putting in the effort to make sure it does. Thanks to everyone who gave helpful advice. Hopefully, this is the last time we ever have to have this fight. Now to the next story, story 2. My mom and sister made me reject my dream job to support them, but I later discovered that my mom had illegally drained the college funds Dad left. Have you ever felt like your own family is purposely sabotaging your future? That is exactly what I, 22F, am struggling with right now. My mother, 45F, and sister, 19F, recently pushed me to turn down a fantastic job offer at a major tech company in San Jose, and I'm still trying to absorb what happened. Let me paint you a picture of how we arrived here. 2 years ago, my father died in a vehicle accident on his way home from work. He was the type of father who never missed any of my coding competitions or academic events, even when he was overburdened with work. Every Sunday morning, we had this custom where he'd cook his famous pancakes, which were simply regular pancakes with chocolate chips, but he was so proud of them. He'd tell us stories from his college days while flipping them and cracking us up with his bad dad jokes. Prior to the accident, our family life was not perfect, but it was stable. My parents had troubles, as do all couples, but they balanced each other out nicely. Dad was the calm, analytical kind who could settle any issue with his careful reasoning, whereas Mom was more emotional and impetuous. They made it work, and our home felt secure and predictable. Everything changed following Dad's death. It wasn't simply the evident loss, it was as if our entire family dynamic had collapsed. Mom became emotionally dependent on my younger sister Ashley, or perhaps the other way around. Regardless, they created a tight, even smothering bond that made me feel like an alien in my own family. Ashley became the focus of Mom's universe, while I was consigned to the role of the responsible one, expected to give up everything for the family's sake. I should clarify about Ashley. Even before Dad died, she was always the most theatrical member of the family. I was the quiet kid who spent hours coding in my room, while she was the social butterfly who required constant attention. Dad used to balance Mom's tendency to accommodate Ashley's every desire, but now he was gone, there was no one to provide a reality check. Their relationship evolved gradually but unmistakably. Ashley's little crises escalated into family emergencies. When she didn't make the cheerleading squad in her senior year of high school, her mother let her miss school for a week and maxed up her credit card with comfort items. When she didn't get into her first choice institution, Mom spent 2 weeks calling administrators and even applying for a loan to make a donation to the school. Meanwhile, I tried to keep everything together. I maintained a 4.0 GPA in computer science, worked part-time at the university's IT department to help pay bills, and cared for my younger brother, Tommy, 10 million. Tommy is such a sweet kid. He's the only one who still sees me as a real person, rather than a tool to be utilized when necessary. I graduated from college this year with a computer science degree, and against all chances, I received an incredible job offer from one of San Jose's top IT businesses. The interview process was harsh, with 6 rounds of technical interviews, coding challenges, and behavioral tests. I prepared for months, staying up late to learn algorithms and data structures while also fulfilling my family responsibilities. When I received the offer letter, I couldn't believe my eyes. The base salary was $125,000, plus a signing bonus and stock options that made my head spin. This wasn't simply a job. It was an opportunity to establish a legitimate career and possibly even aid my family financially. Once I was established, I could finally repay all of my student loans, which Mom couldn't co-sign for because she was too busy paying off Ashley's shopping bills. But last week, Mom entered my room with that expression on her face, as if she were going to explode a bomb that would destroy everything. She sat on my bed, took up the plush penguin Dad bought me for my 16th birthday, one of the few things I still have from him, and said, "Olivia, we need to talk about your job offer." My stomach immediately sank. She went on to tell me that Ashley was struggling with her first year of college and needed to take a vacation. She apparently has anxiety and needs to return home. This entails additional expenses, which mom cannot handle alone. She advised me to ignore the San Jose offer and seek a local job instead so that I could help with the finances and care for Tommy. Ashley's worry manifests itself mysteriously when things don't go her way. She had no issue performing in a 3-hour dance showcase last month, but when her teachers required her to attend morning courses, she experienced crippling social anxiety. She can spend hours at parties with her friends, documenting every second to Instagram, yet she supposedly has panic attacks when it comes time to study for tests. I tried to reason with mom. I spent hours showing her my financial plans, explaining how I would send money home once I had settled in, and even promising to assist Ashley in finding resources for her purported mental health difficulties. But mom would not hear it. Family comes first, she kept stressing, as if my desires and goals were not important to the family's well-being. What is the worst part? While I was talking with mom, Ashley was in her room, sharing images of her recent shopping trip on Instagram. The same sibling who claims she is too anxious to continue college spent hundreds of dollars on new clothes and makeup. I saw the receipts in her email. Yes, we have a family computer. She spent $876 at Sephora last week. That's more than I've spent on groceries in 2 months. When I pointed this up to mom, she became defensive. Ashley is sensitive. She needs these things to feel better, she told me. You've always been the strong one, Olivia. You can handle disappointment better. That's when it struck me. I was the strong one in this family, which meant that my feelings and dreams were irrelevant. The following days were a flurry of anxiety and desperate planning. I contacted my college advisor, who was outraged by the scenario but couldn't provide much assistance. I called the company's HR department to explain my predicament and request additional time, but they could only extend the deadline by a few days. Without family assistance or a co-signer for an apartment contract in San Jose, my options were quickly dwindling. I even attempted to appeal to mom's sensible side. I produced a detailed spreadsheet demonstrating how my San Jose salary will benefit the family more in the long run than a local job paying half the amount. I looked for local therapists that could help Ashley cope with her anxiety while still allowing her to attend school. I volunteered to schedule regular video conversations with Tommy to keep involved in his life. Nothing worked. How did mom respond? Your father would be so disappointed in you for being so selfish. It stung more than anything else. Dad was the one who bought my first computer, stayed up late to help me debug my first programs, and always encouraged me to dream big. Using his memory to control me seemed like a new low. That's when something unexpected occurred. My Uncle James, 42 million, Dad's younger brother, arrived abruptly at our doorstep yesterday. He's always been the cool uncle who pays attention, but we hadn't seen much of him since Dad's burial. He'd apparently been trying to call mom for weeks, but she was ignoring him. He looked at my face and knew something was amiss. While mom was preoccupied with Ashley's current crisis, she was crying because someone had unfollowed her on Instagram. Uncle James and I sat on the back porch, where Dad used to educate me about constellations on clear evenings. I told him everything. I told him about the job offer, mom's demands, Ashley's spending habits, and how I felt as if my future was slipping away. Tommy came out to join us as I was speaking, cuddling up next to me as he often does when he notices I'm angry. He's incredibly perceptive for a 10-year-old. Tommy acquired Dad's quiet brilliance and empathy, whilst Ashley inherited mom's dramatic tendencies. Since Dad's death, he has been my primary source of genuine affection in this house. Instead of simply sympathizing, Uncle James had a determined expression in his eyes, similar to how Dad would appear when he was solving a problem. Your dad would never have wanted this for you, he replied, his voice firm but gentle. Then he made me an offer that would change everything. He has a guest home near his business in a city about an hour from San Jose, and he's prepared to let me stay there for free until I get established. He even offered to co-sign any required loans. While we were conversing, I received a text from my probable future manager at the IT company. She stated she was impressed with my interviews and was excited to have me on the team. They are working on several cutting-edge AI initiatives that are completely aligned with my interests. Reading that message while sitting next to the lone adult who seemed to care about my future felt like the universe was sending me a signal. For the first time in weeks, I felt hopeful. However, when we informed Mom about this possibility, she exploded. The transition was sudden and frightening. She transformed from the passive-aggressive manipulator I had become accustomed to into someone I hardly knew. She accused me of leaving my family, called me selfish, and then dropped a bombshell I didn't see coming. You're just like your father, always putting yourself first. Uncle James intervened quickly, telling Mom she was out of line. He reminded her that Dad had worked tirelessly to support this family. That he had taken the late shift at work, the one he was driving home from when the tragedy occurred, in order to pay for Ashley's dance lessons. The fight that followed was heated, with Ashley joining in to call me selfish and Tommy crying in the corner. The things Mom said during that dispute indicated a lot about how she truly regards me. Apparently, I was always difficult, even as a child. My concentrate on academics rather than socializing was unusual. Even my decision to study computer technology rather than something more suitable for a girl was indicative of my defiance. It seemed as if years of animosity had finally been released. I'm currently sitting in my room, surrounded by half-packed boxes. Uncle James demanded I begin packing just in case, and I'm now trying to figure out what to do next. On one side of my laptop screen, there is a job offer letter, and on the other, there are San Jose apartment ads. The deadline is tomorrow at 5 p.m., Pacific Standard Time. Uncle James is downstairs, ready to assist me if I decide to move out. But Mom's warning to cut me off completely if I leave still rings in my ears. Tommy left a note under my door a few minutes ago. In his shaky handwriting, he wrote, "I love you, Olivia. Dad would want you to be happy." I'm trying not to cry on the page while I type this. I realize this is long, but I needed to get it out. I understand that this is tricky, but am I wrong in wanting to take advantage of this opportunity? Should I give up my work to keep the family at peace, or should I accept Uncle James' offer and risk ruining my connection with Mom and Ashley? I've spent my entire life being responsible, dependable, and willing to make sacrifices. For once, I'd like to select myself. But my guilt is eating me alive. What if Mom is correct? What if I'm being selfish? I will provide an update after I have reached a decision. My hands are shaking so terribly that I can hardly type this. Thank you for reading. If you've made it this far, any advice is welcome. Update 1. First and foremost, I'd want to thank everyone who left positive comments on my previous post. Your remarks provided me the strength to make a decision. I chose to accept the job offer and seek Uncle James' assistance. But what occurred next completely surprised me. The morning after I made my decision, I got up early to begin transferring my belongings. Mom and Ashley weren't talking to me, as I expected. I didn't expect to see my laptop missing from my desk. Following a frenzied hunt, I discovered it in Ashley's room. She attempted to send an email denying my employment offer from my account. Thankfully, she was unaware of the two-factor authentication I had set up. When confronted, Mom defended her. Ashley was just trying to protect our family. That was the moment I knew I had made the correct decision. Uncle James helped me load everything into his vehicle while Mom and Ashley watched from the window, not even coming down to say goodbye. Only Tommy ran out to hug me, putting his favorite action figure in my pocket and murmuring, "For good luck." The drive to Uncle James' house was relatively peaceful. He didn't force me to communicate, just let me analyze everything while my favorite indie rock station played softly in the background. It reminded me of drives I used to take with Dad to clear my mind. Getting situated in the guest house was weird. It's little but ideal for me, a studio with a tiny kitchen and a workstation by the window. Uncle James had already set up a workstation for me, complete with 2 monitors. "Your dad would have wanted you to have the right setup," he told me. The true shock occurred as I was organizing my documents for the new employment. I discovered an old envelope in Dad's work briefcase that Uncle James had kept in storage. Inside were letters from Dad to each of us kids, intended to be opened when we turned 25. I know I shouldn't have opened mine so early, but with everything going on, I needed some connection with him. The letter altered everything. Dad described his own experiences with family pressure. When he was younger, his parents wanted him to take over their modest business, but he chose to study engineering instead. He wrote about how happy he was of my interest in technology and hoped I'd have the fortitude to pursue my aspirations, even if it meant making difficult decisions. But there was something else in the envelope. Bank statements indicating that Dad had established a separate savings account for my college tuition. I never known about this account. It had enough money to cover at least 2 years' tuition. When I showed these to Uncle James, his expression worsened. He made several calls and discovered that Mom had somehow gotten access to this account after Dad died and fully depleted it. I started a new job yesterday. The staff is great, and the projects are even more exciting than I anticipated. My boss personally led me around and introduced me to everyone. During lunch, she mentioned that she had been pulling for me since my interview, especially when I solved a particularly difficult coding problem in an unusual manner. Mom has been phoning non-stop since I left, leaving voicemails alternating between guilt and rage. Ashley wrote a lengthy diatribe on social media about how I had abandoned the family. I've blocked them both for now. I need room to concentrate on my fresh beginning. Uncle James helped me open a separate bank account from Mom's, and I'm learning about financial independence from a coworker who also offers personal finance classes. I am also looking at therapy choices that are covered by my new health insurance. The toughest part is missing Tommy. We video chat every night before his bedtime while Mom attends her evening yoga session. He had been telling me about his science project, and his eyes brightened up when I offered to help him code a simple game for it. I keep rereading Dad's letter anytime I'm feeling guilty. One line in particular stands out. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose your own path, even when others try to hold you back out of their own fear. There's more to look into with the education fund, and Uncle James is assisting me in gathering information. I'll provide another update once I have more information. For the time being, I'm focusing on learning my new work and creating my new life, one day at a time. Update number 2. It has been 3 weeks since my previous update. I regret for the delay, but what I discovered necessitated thorough investigation and legal consulting before I felt safe publishing. Remember the college fund that I mentioned discovering in Dad's papers? Uncle James and I have spent the past few weeks trying to figure out what happened to that money. What we discovered was far worse than we had feared. With the help of Dad's old bank colleague, we discovered that Mom had not only accessed one account, but had systematically depleted multiple accounts Dad had set up. There was a college fund for me, another for Tommy's future schooling, and a general emergency fund. All were emptied within months following Dad's death. Last week, Mom sent me a lengthy email. She sought to get ahead of the narrative, indicating that she was aware we were investigating. The email began with a half-hearted apology for possibly being too harsh, but gradually evolved into something else entirely. She left a message. There's something you need to know about your father. When I was pregnant with you, he had an affair. The note went on to explain how she uncovered the affair, how Dad begged forgiveness, and how she graciously accepted him back. She said that this was why she was always aloof from me, because I reminded her of that difficult time. She concluded by offering that if I discontinued my research into the accounts, we could focus on repairing our relationship. Here's the thing, her story didn't add up. Uncle James and I dug through Dad's old records and discovered something unusual. While Mom alleged Dad was having an affair, he was actually working double shifts to pay off Mom's credit card debt. We discovered old credit card statements with enormous charges from that time period, all made by Mom. The major surprise occurred when we realized Dad's old email address was still operational. We discovered years of correspondence with his lawyer discussing his concerns about Mom's spending habits. He had been recording everything, safeguarding valuables, and opening separate accounts for his children's future. He was not having an affair. He was attempting to shield us from Mom's fiscal carelessness. The emails also revealed something heartbreaking. Dad had planned to leave Mom, not for another woman, but because he was concerned about her influence on the kids. The accident occurred only 2 weeks before he planned to file for divorce. I took all of this material to the lawyer that Uncle James recommended. She was appalled. Apparently, what Mom did with the accounts following Dad's death was not only immoral, but unlawful. She had fabricated documents to obtain access to accounts that she was not permitted to touch. The lawyer discovered something else concerning Ashley's alleged college fees, which Mom had stated as the reason she required my assistance. The majority of that money went toward shopping sprees and luxury things. We discovered credit card bills indicating purchases at high-end retailers, spa treatments, and even a secret spring break trip to Cancun, all while Ashley was allegedly too anxious to attend lectures. I spent hours scrolling through Ashley's social media posts, chronicling every extravagant purchase, luxury vacation, and shopping spree. The time frame coincides exactly with the loss of monies from Dad's accounts. Mom wasn't just allowing Ashley's behavior, she was sponsoring it with money that was legally intended for all of us. The lawyer claims we have a good case of financial fraud. The data left by Dad, together with the paper trail of Mom's activities following his death, creates a clear picture of systematic theft and deception. Tommy's predicament is what concerns me the most right now. He's still living in that toxic environment, seeing Mom and Ashley spend money that should have gone for his future. Uncle James is exploring our options for obtaining custody. The lawyer believes we may have a case, particularly given the financial malfeasance. I have not responded to Mom's email yet. The lawyer advised against any direct communication at this time. But Mom and Ashley must have sensed something is amiss because they've launched a social media smear campaign against me, portraying me as an ungrateful daughter who abandoned her family for a high-paying tech career. The truth is that learning of Dad's impending divorce has been both painful and validating. Painful because Dad died before he could shield us from Mom's destructive actions. Validating, because it proves he witnessed what was going on. He was not immune to mom's manipulation and financial abuse. He was actively attempting to stop it. I'm preparing all of the documentation for legal action. Uncle James has been great throughout this process, spending countless hours assisting me in building our case. My employment is going well, and my team has been understanding of my need for occasional personal time to deal with things. The coming weeks will be critical as we move forward with legal processes. I'll post another update when I can, but for the time being, I need to focus on constructing our case and staying emotionally healthy through it all. My company's health insurance provides therapy, so I started seeing someone to help me digest things. At least I now know the truth. Dad was not the villain in Mom's story. He tried to be our hero to the end. Update 3. The previous 6 weeks have been a blur of legal proceedings, life changes, and final decisions. What began with discovering Dad's buried letter has resulted in a full overhaul of our lives. The court case moved quickly, thanks to the tremendous evidence we had. The judge was particularly concerned about Mom's methodical depletion of Tommy's education money. The most incriminating evidence came from Mom's scrupulous record-keeping. She had documented every unlawful transfer in her personal planner, most likely never expecting anyone to discover it. When Mom was presented with the evidence in court, her veneer finally shattered. She admitted to everything. Forging paperwork to get into Dad's finances, misusing the insurance funds, systematically concealing financial records. The judge's decision was straightforward: full restoration of all diverted cash, plus interest. Mom is currently facing criminal charges for fraud. Ashley's reaction was revealing. Instead of supporting Mom, she quickly distanced herself, claiming she had no idea where the money for her shopping spree came from. Her Instagram influencer hopes were dashed when the court ordered her to return all products purchased with misappropriated monies. The biggest success, however, was not a financial settlement, it was gaining custody of Tommy. When the judge recognized Mom's record of financial abuse and manipulation, as well as evidence of her continuous destructive conduct, she granted me interim custody, with Uncle James serving as co-guardian. Tommy moved in with me last week, and the difference is already evident. He's smiling more, sleeping better, and is enthused about the coding projects we're working on together. My career has accelerated in ways I never expected. My initiative has piqued the interest of high management, and I have been elevated to team leader. The steadiness of my employment and income played a crucial role in the custody decision. Mom made one final attempt at manipulation, vowing to forgive everything provided I dropped the accusations and returned Tommy. Her lawyer instructed her to stop when I provided recordings of her threatening phone calls. Ashley has been posting passive-aggressive posts about toxic family members and treachery, but her power has diminished since she was forced to return her costly outfit. She's moved in with a friend, refusing to live with Mom now that the money has run out. Uncle James has been my rock throughout this. He's helped Tommy set up his new room, located him a terrific school nearby, and even opened a new college fund for him, which Mom can't access. We have weekly family dinners where we talk about Dad's pleasant memories, which are slowly healing after years of manipulation. The guest house has become our home. Tommy's room is filled in science posters and programming flowcharts that we created together. He's joined a robotics club at his new school, and his passion reminds me of Dad. I started therapy to analyze everything, and it's helping me realize that none of this was my fault. Dad tried to protect us. And now I'm completing what he started. Looking back at my initial post, I can't believe how far we've come, from nearly giving up on my aspirations to now completely realizing them while providing Tommy with the secure home he deserves. Mother and Ashley's true colors were shown. But by losing them, we gained something far more valuable: truth and freedom. To those who may be in similar situations, believe your intuition. If something feels off, it probably is. Sometimes the family you choose is more significant than the one you are born into. Thank you for giving me the courage to research while my world was collapsing. Your encouragement gave me the courage to fight for justice, not just for myself, but for Tommy and Dad's memory. You transformed our life. Now to the next story, Story 3. I paid my sister and her fiancé's rent for years, only to learn they mocked me behind my back. I cut them off, and karma hit. Yes, you heard that correctly, rent. It wasn't as if they provided me with a place to reside, it was the opposite. I was sending them $800 each month to assist pay their home and bills. It all began roughly 3 years ago. Emma and her fiancé, Jared, were going through a difficult time financially. They were drowning in debt, and I could tell they were too proud to seek help. I had recently taken a job teaching high school. The salary wasn't terrific, but I wasn't married and didn't have any children, so I thought I could afford it. What's the point of having siblings? I offered to help them for a bit until they could get back on their feet. They were grateful, or so I thought. However, the interim arrangement dragged on. A month turned into 6. 6 months turned into 12. And then it hit me. 3 years of giving money every month, without fail. I restructured my entire life around it, no large purchases, no trips, simply living frugally to keep things going. Still, I did not complain. I knew I was doing the correct thing. Family comes first, always. Then followed the wedding announcement. They were finally getting married after all these years, and I thought, okay, this is a watershed moment. I secretly wished they'd tell me they didn't need my assistance anymore. Instead, Emma called me one day and asked if I could help with her wedding expenses. I'll never forget that call. I hesitated for a long time before telling her no. Emma, I already send you $800 a month. I can't do more than that, I told her. She became silent. I'm not sure what she wanted me to say, but I needed to draw the line someplace. Dad's birthday. The truth emerges. Fast forward 2 months to my father's birthday. We held a large family gathering at Grandma's place. It was the usual chaos, tons of food, kids running around, and folks debating whose barbecue sauce was superior. Emma and Jared appeared carefree. We were all in excellent spirits, enjoying beverages and discussing old family stories. Everything appeared normal. Toward the conclusion of the event, my grandmother approached and caressed my arm. "Brian, can we talk outside for a minute?" she said gently. I didn't think much about it. Grandma is known for her little heart-to-heart conversations. It can be life advice or simply a word of encouragement. I believed she was going to encourage me to settle down. She was always wondering when I was going to find a good girl and start a family. We strolled onto the porch, which was quieter. She looked around to ensure no one was listening in. Then she said something that struck me like a punch to the belly. "They made fun of you," she replied quietly. "Who?" I inquired, wondering. "Emma and Jared. They laughed behind your back." I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" She paused before speaking. "They think you're stuck in life. That you'll never have a family of your own. That you're wasting your time trying to help them. They joke about how much you sacrifice while you live alone and struggle to be a teacher." I felt a tightness in my chest. I could not believe it. I had given so much for them, and this is how they perceived me? Some kind of loser who should be pitied and mocked at? I stood there in silence, taking in her words. Grandma stared at me with sad, knowing eyes. "Brian, you're a good man," she added softly. Grandma responded, "But you don't have to let them treat you like this. They're taking advantage of your kindness." I nodded, still stunned. What should I do with this information? Confront them in front of everybody? Ruin the evening? I was not going to let them have the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. Instead, I went back inside, smiled, and pretended everything was fine. I even clinked glasses with Jared when we celebrated Dad's birthday. However, within, everything had altered. I realized I couldn't continue living like this. Did they think I was a joke? Fine. Let's see how hilarious things get if the money stops rolling in. I wasn't going to lose my cool. I'd play it smart and keep it elegant. But they were soon to discover that I was no pushover. The fallout begins. The morning following Dad's birthday party, I awoke early, still thinking about what Grandma had said. Part of me wanted to call Emma immediately afterward and confront her, but I opted not to. I needed time to contemplate. Instead, I went about my usual business: coffee, lesson preparations, and grading papers. Business as usual. About a week later, Emma called me. "Hey, Brian. Just checking in," she remarked cheerfully, as if nothing were wrong. "Hey," I said, maintaining a neutral tone. She began droning on about wedding plans, flowers, guest lists, and an issue with the caterer. I let her speak for a while. Then she casually mentioned money. "Oh, and Jared was wondering if you could send this month's rent a little early. We have a few things coming up." I had to fight myself not to chuckle. "Yeah, about that. I'm actually going through some financial stuff myself," I commented. "I won't be able to send the money this month." There was a pause. "Wait, you mean just this month, right? You'll still help us after that?" "I don't know, Emma. I've been helping for 3 years. I might need to focus on my own situation for a while." She remained silent for a moment. Then I noticed her voice thicken. "Brian, are you serious? We're counting on this money." "Yeah, well, I was counting on my family not laughing behind my back." Another prolonged stillness. I didn't elaborate, and she never asked what I meant. Instead, she uttered a stiff, "Okay," and abruptly terminated the phone. That marked the beginning of the fallout. The family pressure. 2 weeks have gone by. I didn't hear from Emma again, but I knew something was up. Then, one night, my mom called me unexpectedly. "Brian, I just talked to Emma," she said. And I could see she wasn't happy. "She says you stopped helping her with her bills. What's going on?" I exhaled. "Mom, I've been sending them $800 a month for 3 years. It's not like I owe them anything." "Well, yeah, but they're family, and Emma said you've been acting distant." "Did she also mention that they've been making fun of me behind my back?" I asked her. That silenced her for a second. "What are you talking about?" I told her what Grandma said. For a time, there was only astonished stillness on the other end. Finally, she spoke again, this time in a gentler voice. "Brian, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. You've done more for them than anyone could have expected. If they're treating you like this, I understand why you're upset." It was a relief to hear her say that. But I knew things were going to get ugly. The confrontation. Sure enough, a few days later, Jared called me unexpectedly. "Hey, Brian," he said, his tone forced but courteous. "Emma's really upset. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "Is that right?" I asked, maintaining my composure. "Yeah, man. I don't know where you're getting these ideas, but we've never said anything bad about you. You've been great to us." "Oh, so Grandma just made that up?" I inquired honestly. Jared stammered for a second. "Look, if she said something, it was probably twisted. You know how old people can exaggerate." I didn't believe it for a second. "You know what, Jared? Let's not pretend. I'm done with the money. You guys are on your own. I hope the wedding goes well." I hung up before he could argue. Grandmother's revelation. The real kicker arrived a few days later, when I received a call from Grandma herself. "Brian, honey, can you come over? I have something to show you," she said to him. Curious, I went to her residence. She walked me into her study and gave me an old family photo album. "I was going through some things and found these," she explained with a slight smile. I flipped through the pages and came across a collection of childhood images of me, Emma, and Jared. Then I noticed something unexpected. A letter slipped between the pages. It was from more than 20 years ago, before I was even born. "Grandma, what is this?" I questioned, pulling it out. "Read it," she replied softly. The letter came from my late grandfather, and it detailed a hidden trust fund he had established for his grandchildren, to be distributed equally, unless one is found to be abusing the family bond. "Emma and Jared don't know about this," Grandma continued quietly. "But I think you should." I sat there, startled. It wasn't simply about money anymore. This was about setting boundaries. And perhaps karma was about to catch up with them. The fallout escalates. Grandma showed me the letter, and I had a lot to think about. My late grandfather had established a trust fund for all of us, but she did not disclose how much money was in it. She made it obvious that no one else in the family knew, not Emma, Jared, or my parents. "Why are you telling me this now?" I questioned her. Grandmother gave me a knowing glance. "Because I want you to understand something. You're not the failure they make you out to be. You've worked hard, sacrificed for others, and shown more integrity than most people ever would. This fund, it was meant to reward people like you." I nodded carefully, absorbing her words. I didn't want to rush into anything based on this new information, but it was comforting to know that I had some concealed leverage. Emma and Jared panic. The drama became more intense during the next week. Emma and Jared were panicking, I learned through the family grapevine. I believe limiting their monthly allowance affected them harder than I expected. Jared's work hours had been reduced, and Emma was having difficulty paying some of the wedding providers. I assumed they would figure it out. Instead, they began attempting to guilt other family members into giving them money. It backfired spectacularly. My mother stated to one of her sisters that I had been financially supporting Emma and Jared for several years. Word spread immediately. Everyone in the family found out pretty quickly. My Aunt Laura, who never holds back, supposedly ripped into Emma during a family function I wasn't even attending. "You let Brian pay your bills for 3 years, and now you're playing the victim? Are you serious?" she allegedly said. "Emma loses it." Emma called me later, enraged. "What the hell, Brian? Did you tell everyone about the money?" "No," I said quietly. "I only told one person. And you brought this on yourself." "Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" she asked. "Emma, I think you have bigger problems than embarrassment," I told you. "Maybe look in the mirror and ask yourself why you believed it was acceptable to treat me as a joke." She did not have a response. I assumed that was the end of it, but Jared decided to push things. He must have been desperate because he showed up unexpectedly at my school one afternoon. He waited for me in the parking lot. "Brian, we need to talk," he replied, trying to seem calm but clearly agitated within. "About what?" I asked, crossing my arms. "Look, man, Emma has been crying nonstop. People are turning against us. We just want to make things right," he explained. "Oh, you want to make something right now? After 3 years of taking my money while laughing behind my back?" I shake my head. "No thank you, Jared. I am done being your safety net." His cheeks reddened. "You act as if we intended to hurt you. It wasn't like this?" "So, how was it, Jared?" I interrupted. "Explain to me how ridiculing someone who helps you isn't intended to hurt them." He did not have a positive response. Instead, he muttered something about how everything was a misunderstanding and walked out. Dad steps in. Later that night, I received a call from my father. He rarely participates in drama, so I knew this was serious. "Brian," he explained. "I had a lengthy conversation with Emma and Jared. They are struggling right now, but they regret how they treated you." "That's good," I replied frankly. "But I'm not interested in fixing things right now. They need to solve their own difficulties." Dad exhaled. "Look, I am not saying you are incorrect. You've been more than generous, but maybe it's time to sit down and have a serious conversation with them, clear the air." I thought for a moment. "I'll think about it," I finally said. But deep down, I was not in a forgiving mood. They had been using me for several years. They'd have to prove they deserved another opportunity. And I wasn't going to make things easy for them. Our family meeting. About a week following my father's call, I received an invitation. Handwritten. That was odd. It came from Emma. She asked me to meet her and Jared at a coffee shop near their house for a family meeting. I contemplated going, but curiosity got the better of me. I assumed I'd listen to them, despite my low expectations. When I arrived, the cafe was almost completely vacant. Emma and Jared were already there, looking a little overly prepared. Emma wore a phony smile, and Jared fidgeted with his phone. Emma remarked, "Hey, thanks for coming," as I sat down. "Sure, what is this about?" I asked, keeping it brief. Emma took a big breath. "Look, we'd simply like to apologize. We shouldn't have talked about you that way. It was wrong, and we sincerely apologize." Jared nodded and joined in. "We were agitated and told some horrible jokes. We didn't mean anything serious." I sat back and observed them. It all felt too polished and scripted. "Okay," I said. "But let me ask you a question. If Grandma hadn't told me, would you have ever apologized?" They froze for a second. Emma looked to Jared, who swiftly spoke out. "Of course we would have, eventually." I chuckled. "Right. Sure." They shifted uncomfortably. That's when Emma revealed the true reason for the meeting. "The favor, Brian, we need a favor," she explained cautiously. There it was. I almost laughed aloud. "Let me guess. You need money." "Not exactly," Emma responded nervously. "We need you to co-sign a loan for us." I stared at her like she had a second head. "Are you serious?" "We've struck a hard patch," Jared explained. "And we just need some help refinancing the house. If you co-sign, we'll obtain a better rate, and we'll handle the rest. You would not have to pay anything." I couldn't believe what I heard. "You've got to be kidding me," I responded. "You think I'm going to put my name on a loan for you after all this? Are you listening to yourself right now?" Emma's face reddened. "We are not trying to take advantage of you. We're working to make things right." I shook my head in astonishment. "You don't solve problems by begging for more handouts. You fix things by accepting responsibility for your own lives." Jared threw his hand down on the table. "You are being unreasonable, Brian. We are family." I laughed bitterly. "Exactly. And family members do not treat each other like dirt. You are on your own." I got up, tossed a couple bucks on the table for my coffee, and went out without saying anything. The bombshell. A few days later, the unexpected news broke. Grandma called me, sounding shaken. "Brian, you should come over right away." "It's important," she remarked. When I got to her house, she handed me an envelope with my name on it. Inside was a letter from the bank regarding the trust fund. Emma and Jared had apparently caught wind of it and were attempting to demand a larger share, claiming that I had withheld family assets. "They went to a lawyer," Grandma said, her voice shaking with fury. "They say you hid the trust fund from them, even though you didn't know about it until recently." I was stunned. "You've got to be kidding me." "They are desperate, Brian. They're grasping for straws," she remarked. "But this is low, even for them?" Then it struck me. They weren't only struggling. They were sinking. And now they're willing to throw me under the bus to save themselves. I'm not going to let them get away with this, I stated forcefully. Grandma smiled a little sadly. Good. It's about time someone teaches them a lesson. An unexpected call. I wasn't done being surprised though. The next morning, I received a call from a lawyer representing Emma and Jared. I readied myself for a heated argument, but the lawyer sounded unexpectedly sorry. Mr. Daniels, he replied. I wanted to inform you that my clients have chosen to abandon their complaint. They'd like to handle the situation privately. Withdraw their claim? Why? There was an awkward moment. Let's just say some fresh information has surfaced about their financial predicament. I believe they knew they were in no position to pursue it legally. I couldn't help wondering what had happened. Later that day, I heard from Aunt Laura. Apparently, Jared was sacked when someone anonymously claimed that he had been embezzling minor quantities of company money. To make matters worse, the bank flatly refused their loan application, citing credit worries. Karma had struck them severely. And I had not even moved a finger. Emma's final attempt a few days after the trust claim disaster, I was still processing everything when Emma texted me. We should talk, please. I ignored her. The next day, she showed up at my residence unexpectedly. She was pacing outside my building when I returned home from work. I sighed and stepped out of the car. What do you want, Emma? I asked, already fatigued. She appeared frustrated. Brian, I didn't realize Jared was going to go this far with the lawyer. I swear I did not want this to happen. Did he panic? I scoffed. You were both perfectly happy attempting to rip me off with that trust fund. She stared down at her feet and did not refute it. I'm sorry. Okay? We've just been under so much stress, the wedding expenses, the house, everything is coming apart. I folded my arms. You know who's at fault, right? I shot back. Perhaps you wouldn't be in this situation if you hadn't relied on me for so long. She winced and then, unexpectedly, added, You're correct. But I have no one else to turn to. I looked at her in bewilderment. You don't understand, do you? I am done. I gave you years of my life and thousands of dollars, and you just laughed behind my back. Now you came here expecting me to save you again? Brian, you're my brother, she whispered quietly. We're supposed to look out for each other. Yeah? Where was that support when you and Jared made fun of me? When did you attempt to take it from me? She did not have a response. I shook my head. Emma, I'm finished. This will be our last conversation regarding money, trust funds, or anything else. I don't want anything more to do with you or Jared. Her eyes widened. You can't simply cut me off like that. We are family. Watch me. With that, I walked inside, leaving her standing there. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, but it was enough. Grandma takes a stand. The next day, Grandma called. She had heard everything, and nothing in our family keeps a secret for long. Brian, I want you to know something, she stated. I've decided I'm not going to talk to Emma or Jared anymore, at least not for a long time. I was startled. Grandma, you don't have to do that for me. I do, she stated firmly. You've been nothing but wonderful to them, yet they attempted to betray you. If they don't respect you, they won't respect me. They crossed the line, and I am not going to pretend differently. Hearing that from her meant more than I could express. Aunt Laura's news. A few weeks later, I received another surprise. I ran into Aunt Laura at the grocery store, and she took me aside. Hello, I heard about everything that happened. I just wanted to tell you how proud I am of you, she said. Proud of me? I asked, perplexed. Yes, you have finally stood up for yourself. Emma had a knack of manipulating people, but you didn't let her take advantage of you. I laughed. It wasn't easy, but I couldn't live like that anymore. You did the right thing. By the way, you might want to check in with Grandma. She's making some modifications to the trust fund. That grabbed my attention. Changes? Laura laughed. Let's just say Emma and Jared might not be included in the future plans. Grandmother's final decision. When I saw Grandma a few days later, she verified it. I talked to the lawyer, she added, and I've determined that if Emma and Jared can't demonstrate responsibility and respect, they won't earn their share of the trust. I'm giving them the opportunity to change, but if they don't, the trust will be divided between you and your cousins instead. I was speechless for a moment. You don't need to do that, Grandma. I do not want any of the money. I know, she responded, smiling. That's why you deserve it. Cut ties for good. Following that, I cut off all communication with Emma and Jared. No texts, no calls. I banned their numbers and quit dealing with family drama. Things gradually became easier, and I had no idea how heavy my weight was until it was lifted. The actual kicker? Jared had moved out of the house after losing his job, and their relationship was on the rocks, so Emma had to return to live with her mother. I wasn't happy about it, but I couldn't ignore the irony. Now, on to the next story, story 4. I was left at the altar when my fiancée ran off with my brother. 2 years later, she asked for my help, claiming she now saw the toxicity of my family. 2 years ago, I stood at the altar, ashamed and heartbroken. My fiancée ditched me an hour before the wedding and took off with my brother. I never saw it coming, or perhaps I overlooked the warning signs because I adored her. We had been together for 5 years, and I assumed we were happy. However, looking back, it is evident that I was unaware of many things. My family never treated me as a priority. My parents always favored my brother. He was the golden child, attractive, wealthy, and the type of guy everyone gravitated toward. I was the quieter one, always being compared to him, making me feel like I didn't measure up. Growing up, I was always asked why I couldn't be more like my brother. Or your brother did it, why can't you? I expected things to change as we got older, but they didn't. If anything, things grew worse. My fiancée had everything I wanted in a partner: intelligent, attractive, and determined. However, she had a selfish side. It wasn't clear at first. It manifested itself in little ways, such as insisting on always getting her way or never apologizing when she wounded my feelings. I dismissed it because I loved her and believed we were creating a life together. I never expected her to betray me the way she did. The wedding was meant to be the best day of my life. Everything was ready: the venue, the food, and the guests. I awoke nervous yet delighted, knowing that I would soon begin a new chapter with the lady I loved. Then, 1 hour before the ceremony, she called me. Her voice was calm, almost frigid, when she told me she couldn't do it. She stopped loving me. Then she revealed the true bombshell. She had been dating someone else. That person was my brother. She didn't even appear guilty about it. She stated she didn't want to hurt me, but she felt compelled to follow her heart. I didn't even have time to digest what she said before hanging up. My parents, who had already arrived at the event, knew. My brother had told them earlier in the morning. Instead of supporting me, they tried to keep things calm to avoid humiliating themselves. When I addressed them, they defended her. They said things like, "Maybe it's for the best, and you don't want to marry someone who doesn't love you." My mother even had the arrogance to advise that I be happy for them. My father was no better. He simply stood there and ordered me to keep it together. It wasn't until later that I discovered my parents' involvement in all of this. My brother had always been interested in her, and they seemed to think she was too good for me. They decided she would be a better fit for him. They had been urging her to select him for months, even offering her financial support if she left me for him. I had no clue my family could be that deceptive. I walked out of the venue that day without looking back. I left everything behind, including my family, friends, and hometown. I couldn't stand being near any of them. I went to another state and started again. I got a job, a little apartment, and spent the next 2 years repairing my life. At first, it was difficult. I knew no one, and the loneliness was overwhelming. But as time passed, I discovered serenity. I met new people, began treatment, and concentrated on myself for the first time in my life. I did not inform anyone where I was or how to reach me. I didn't want anything to do with those who had deceived me. Then, 2 years later, my ex-fiancée arrived at my home. I had just returned home from work, and when I opened the door, I could scarcely recognize her. She appeared fatigued and worn out, as if she hadn't slept or eaten properly in days. Her once confident and polished manner was gone. She shook and her eyes were red from sobbing. She told me that living with my brother had become a nightmare. He was manipulative, emotionally abusive, and disloyal. Behind closed doors, the beloved golden child turned out to be a monster. They had married shortly after our wedding catastrophe and had a child together, but their relationship had crumbled. My parents, who had previously been so willing to assist her, turned against her when she failed to achieve their expectations. She stated that she felt caged, alone, and terrified. She intended to divorce my brother but was scared of what he may do. He possessed money, contacts, and a vicious streak. She was afraid he would wreck her finances and take their child away. She approached me because she believed I could assist. She asked me to testify in court about how toxic and manipulative my family was. She believed my testimony would boost her case and help her keep custody of her child. I stood there, listening to her, angry. She had made her decisions. She knew exactly what kind of person my brother was, Yet she picked him over me. She allowed my family to manipulate her and went away without looking back. And now, after everything she has put me through, she expects me to come to her rescue. I told her no. I did not yell or quarrel, I just said no. I closed the door, it felt nice. But it did not last. A few days later, the texts began. She managed to spread the news about her arrival. Old friends and even mutual acquaintances began reaching out to me. They labeled me selfish, spiteful, and cowardly for refusing to assist a woman in need. Her former maid of honor, the same girl who was meant to support her at our wedding, sent me a lengthy note about how I was not man enough to step up. She claimed I was confirming my family's point. That I was weak and did not deserve my ex in the first place. I couldn't believe their arrogance. These people had departed from my life following the wedding. None of them had spoken up for me back then, but now they believed they had the right to lecture me. I disregarded the majority of it, but it still stung. They had no idea what I had gone through. They didn't care. They simply wanted me to fix a situation that was not mine to fix. Now I'm wondering if I did the proper thing. I owe my ex-fiancée nothing. She created her bed, and now she must lie in it. But there's a youngster involved. An innocent child who didn't pick this situation. Part of me wonders if my refusal to assist will harm him in the long run. At the same time, aiding her would mean reintroducing my family and her drama into my life. And I am not sure I am willing to do it. Reddit, what would you have done in my position? Did I make the right decision, or am I also selfish? Update 1. I honestly didn't anticipate my post to get so viral. To be honest, when I originally started penning things out, I had no idea if anyone would care. But now I'm reading through hundreds of comments, some helpful, some difficult to read, and it's been a lot to comprehend. Thank you to everyone who has offered advice or simply expressed their thoughts. Whether you agree with me or not, I appreciate your support and diverse viewpoints. Writing all of this out has definitely helped me go through a lot of emotions and gain some clarity. But it's also brought out a lot of feelings I thought I'd buried deep down. After posting, I spent the rest of the evening reading the comments. Some individuals brought up points I hadn't considered, such as the possibility that getting engaged in my ex-fiancée's legal difficulties may exacerbate the situation. Not only for me, but for the child as well. Others were more direct, instructing me to keep as far away as possible. She created her bed. Now she may lie in it. Those statements helped me feel better about my first reaction to her turning up at my home. But then there were the ones who mentioned something different. The child. I know I don't owe anything to my ex-fiancée. But hearing so many people say, the child is innocent in all of this, really got to me. Many of you suggested that I try to do something for the kid without being drawn back into the poisonous mess that is my family. And it is what I have been struggling with ever since. I don't want anything to do with her or my brother again. I don't want to be the hero or decent guy in a situation where I'm only setting myself up for further heartbreak. But at the same time, I feel compelled to do something, even if it isn't for her. It's funny though. After reading so many of your comments, I began to wonder if there was anything I could do that wouldn't need me to communicate with her again or get dragged back into the drama. I even pondered phoning a lawyer to see what would happen if I testified or aided in some manner. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized. It's still not my responsibility to change anything. And especially not if it involves interacting with my poisonous family again. However, the guilt of knowing that the child is trapped in the center of this chaos persists. Then, like clockwork, my brother reappeared in the image. The email. Yesterday morning, I received an email from him. Yes, my brother, the one I haven't spoken to in 2 years. The last time we did this was when I canceled my wedding. His email was frigid, and simply reading it made my stomach plummet. It was short and to the point. I heard our ex-fiancée asked you for aid. This is a tremendous error. If you become interested, keep out of family matters. You'll regret it. I stared at the message for much too long. I was inclined to respond, but then I thought, why the hell should I? This guy is the one who forced me out of my own life. He was the one who perpetrated all of this manipulation with my ex. And now he believes he can tell me what to do? The arrogance. To be honest, I'm not sure if the word audacity is strong enough to describe how I feel about him. But I did not answer. I could not be bothered. It's almost funny how entitled he still feels. He has no idea what I've been through or what I've had to deal with over the years, and yet he believes he gets to decide how I should handle things. Thanks. That was when the phone rang. An unknown number. And I am sure you can guess who it was. Yep. My mother. After 2 years of silence, she finally decided to phone me, The moment I picked up the phone and heard her voice, I was reminded of all the reasons I'd cut ties with her and my father. I didn't even get a "how have you been?" or "I miss you" before she got right into it. She began discussing the divorce, my brother, and how I needed to be the bigger person and maintain peace for the benefit of the family. That's when I snapped. I don't recall what I said, but I know I told her I didn't want to hear it anymore. She went on, however, about how difficult things were for my brother and how I was punishing the child by not intervening. I told her I didn't care and wasn't going to fix their mess anymore. I hung up after that. That conversation made me numb. For some reason, it reminded me of everything my parents had done to me, how they always favored my brother, how they tolerated his worst conduct, and how they always expected me to be the quiet one who simply accepted everything they threw at me. It has never been about me. Not once. I've always been the backup son, expected to deal with whatever trash came my way. Hearing my mother defend my brother again was like getting slapped in the face. It made me realize that nothing had changed, not with my parents or with him. And to be honest, it is why I am not returning. As tempting as it is to take the moral high ground, I know I'd only be perpetuating the toxic cycle. So, I'm finished. I've made peace with going away, but this situation has resurfaced many old scars that I thought were healed. As much as I want to block everything out and pretend it's not happening, I can't ignore the reality that the child is caught in the center of it all. I keep thinking about how helpless he must feel as he watches everything unfold. I know he is innocent, but what if he is being emotionally manipulated, as my ex was? It kills me just thinking about it. Still, I keep telling myself that this is not my struggle. I've already been through enough, and I'm not about to be drawn back into their drama. I've been sitting with these emotions for a few days, trying to figure out what to do. Part of me wants to just move on, leave them to their mess, and walk away forever. But there's another part of me that wonders if I can aid the child without getting sucked back into the fray. I'm not sure what the correct move is yet. But I do know one thing: I cannot allow myself to return to the person I was before. The one who was always trying to make everything better for everyone else while ignoring my own needs. I worked way too hard to get here to be dragged back in. But the remorse over the child? Yes, it is still there. And it isn't going away anytime soon. How would you handle my situation? Would you help, or would you just walk away? I'm having trouble finding the right balance. Update 2. I figured things would calm down following my last update, but I was mistaken. Instead, things have become even worse, and I'm honestly wondering how I put up with these individuals for so long. I feel like the universe is putting my determination to the test. Every time I believe I've erected a tall enough wall to keep them out, someone finds a way to sneak over it or slip through a crack. Since my mother's call, I've been completely inundated. It began with a few texts from my extended family, including aunts, uncles, and cousins. And now it appears that they have all established a single front. They're coming at me from all sides, accusing me of damaging the family by not supporting my brother, or, worse, by remaining out of his family problems, despite the fact that I am doing just that. It's as if they believe I'm bound to get engaged simply because we share blood. Some of them have even accused me of holding a grudge and not being a man about it. I've been working hard over the last 2 years to restore my life and move on from the toxic disaster they created. They now believe I should abandon everything in order to return to the drama. It is exhausting. They don't understand that leaving away was not a choice made out of spite, but out of necessity. I couldn't keep living in that familial dynamic. It was suffocating. But they do not want to hear that. To them, family means unwavering commitment, even if it means sacrificing your happiness and well-being. On top of all the familial drama, I've begun receiving emails from my ex-fiancée. She's been sending them every few days now. I initially ignored them but ultimately caved in and opened one. I almost wished I hadn't, because they were all identical. She begs me to reconsider, emphasizing how much I can help her and her child. Each email is more urgent than the last, and she has even started sending photos of the child. I understand she's in a bad predicament, but the entire situation feels exploitative. She knows I'm not heartless, and I believe she's attempting to use that against me. She seems to know that if she tugs on my heartstrings, I will give in. The thing is, I am not stupid. I see what she is doing. But I can't deny it makes me feel guilty. I did not ask for those photos, and I did not want them. But she knows I'll look at them, and the child's face in those photos, with his little eyes looking up at me, guilt trips me more than anything else. I can't shake the feeling that I'm letting him down, although knowing that not becoming engaged is the correct thing to do. And just when I thought things couldn't get worse, one of my old acquaintances contacted me unexpectedly. He's someone I haven't communicated with in years, But he obviously heard about the scenario through the grapevine. He called me late one evening, and when his name appeared on the screen, I almost didn't respond. I wasn't in the mood for another, "you should do the right thing" conversation, but I answered anyway. He didn't even waste time exchanging pleasantries. He stepped straight in, telling me to be the larger person and aid my ex-fiancée, even if it was simply to safeguard the child. He went on to say that I couldn't just let a child suffer because of my brother's actions. I'm not sure if he didn't comprehend the whole picture or if he just didn't care, but it was evident to me that he expected me to help simply because it was the moral thing to do. He depicted me as a monster for not immediately going to her rescue. I told him I couldn't help and that the matter was between her, my brother, and my family, not me. But he didn't hear it. He accused me of being stubborn, carrying grudges, and neglecting this child's needs. He made it sound as if I was abandoning someone who was obviously in need. But here's the thing, she's not the only person in need. I've spent so many years in this toxic environment, dealing with everyone else's problems but never my own. I am done with that. I quickly stopped the call, but it only made me feel more conflicted. I wanted to defend myself and explain why I wasn't going to get involved, but I didn't. I understand it is not my obligation to clean up this mess. I understand she and her family made their decisions, and they now have to live with them. But the guilt is still there. No matter how hard I try, it's been difficult to focus on anything else lately. I find myself questioning everything. I went out with some friends the other day to distract myself from the situation, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. One of them even joked that I was being a good Samaritan by not getting involved, which made me laugh. But it wasn't amusing. It only made me feel even more alienated. My buddies don't truly comprehend what I'm going through. The few friends I have left from my old life are either too afraid to speak up or simply believe I am doing the right thing. However, it does not feel right. Especially when a child is involved. I've also been thinking about how my ex-fiancée's situation could worsen if my brother and parents continue to press for full custody. I'm honestly not sure what could happen. My family has always been adept at manipulating the system, and I've witnessed them do so previously. I'm concerned that the youngster will be placed in a circumstance that is as horrible, if not worse, than what he is now suffering with. Despite these sentiments, I can't bring myself to get personally involved. So, I am still stuck. Part of me continues thinking that remaining out of it is the proper decision. But another part of me is questioning if I'm making the wrong decision. Will I live in regret if I don't help? And if I do help, would it only lead me back into their toxic world? This is a no-win situation. What would you do in my shoes? Would you aid the child, even if it meant reconnecting with your poisonous family again? Or would you keep your distance and let them sort things out for themselves? Update 3. After reading more of your comments and reflecting on the situation, I realized I couldn't sit back and do nothing, for the sake of the child. While I owe nothing to my ex-fiancé or my family, I understood that the child did not choose to be born into this situation. He is innocent. And if I have the means to help him escape the toxic environment that my brother and family have created, I should try. But I also realized that if I was going to do something, I needed to keep my peace in the process. I will not let them take me back into their world. I've worked too hard to rebuild my life and set boundaries, and I'm not going to give it all up for something out of my control. So I spent a lot of time thinking about it. Eventually, I came up with what I thought was the best compromise. I submitted an anonymous report to Child Protective Services, CPS. At first, I was unsure whether this was the proper decision. But as I thought about it more, it seemed evident that this was the only way I could possibly help without getting dragged back into the pandemonium. One evening, I sat down with all of the information I had. What my ex-fiancé had told me about my brother's behavior, how my parents treated her, and how toxic and manipulative the family dynamic had always been. I added all pertinent detail I could think of. I didn't simply talk about the physical and mental trauma my ex-fiancé had experienced. I also discussed how my brother's dominating behavior had impacted everyone around him, particularly her. I detailed how he had always used his charm to trick everybody, including my parents, into turning a blind eye to what he did. I made sure to explain how my parents had always supported him, making excuses for him and putting me aside in the process. I realized that if CPS was to investigate the incident, they would need to grasp the entire context of the child's surroundings. My brother's behavior was not the only issue. My family had always opted to enable his acts rather than hold him accountable. I also attached screenshots of some of the emails my ex-fiancée sent me. She had expressed her fear for herself and the child, her sense of being imprisoned in the marriage, and her lack of a support system. I knew I didn't have first-hand evidence of abuse against the child, But I hoped CPS would find enough in what I presented to launch an investigation. They might not be able to locate enough to intervene, but they would at least be aware of the situation. I needed to know that someone was watching out for the child, even if it wasn't me. Filing that report felt like a weight was lifted off my chest. It was the proper thing to do, but I didn't have to return to the craziness of my old life. I informed CPS that I wanted to remain anonymous and did not want to be contacted for follow-ups or participate in the case in any way. I did not want my name mentioned. I just wanted to make sure the kid was secure, and I felt if CPS thought my report had merit, they'd look into it further without my involvement. I did not expect immediate feedback or closure. CPS was unlikely to provide me with updates, and if they did, it would most likely be after they had done an inquiry. I was at ease knowing that I had done everything I could. I didn't have to reopen old wounds from my family's dysfunction, nor did I have to get caught up in their drama. At the end of the day, the report was the most effective thing I could do without jeopardizing my mental health or the life I'd worked so hard to rebuild. In the days that followed, I attempted to concentrate on moving forward, which is easier said than done. My family is relentless, and every time I think they'll leave me alone, another message or email appears. This time, it wasn't simply my mother and a distant cousin. This time, my brother reached out. And honestly, I didn't know how to answer. He sent me a short email accusing me of betraying the family and acting vindictively. He told me I was making a major mistake and would regret it. But there was something else about the tone of the message that made me pause for a moment. It wasn't simply anger. He was concerned. I did not even bother responding. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that everything he said was pure manipulation. It was not about him. It was about control. And I wasn't about to fall for it again. I've done this song and dance previously. It is always the same. They try to make me feel awful about setting boundaries and doing the right thing. But, in the end, they're the ones who caused this mess. I don't owe them an explanation anymore, for anything. I hadn't heard from my ex-fiancée in a few days, which was a relief, until yesterday, when I received one final email from her. It was short. Just a simple message that read, "Thank you. And I'm sorry for what I put you through." There are no details. No explanations. Only those words. It left me with mixed emotions. On the one hand, I'm relieved she acknowledged the pain she caused. But on the other hand, it made me realize how much she is going through. Perhaps something has changed in her situation, or she is finally recognizing the truth of her predicament. Regardless, it's evident that she's still battling. I don't know what will happen next in her custody struggle, but if there's even a slim chance she can get the child out of that harmful atmosphere, I hope it goes well for her. But I have to tell myself that I cannot get back engaged. I can't solve her problems. And I've already contributed significantly. Now it is up to the authorities. If CPS investigates and finds sufficient evidence to act, I will have done my part. If not, I'll have to admit that I can't control everything, no matter how much I want to. Final update. Thank you to everyone who has provided advice, encouragement, and even tough love. Your words helped me understand the big picture and gave me the confidence to act without second-guessing myself. And to anyone reading this who may be in a similar situation, it's okay to keep your peace. You can care for others while still maintaining your boundaries. Doing the right thing can sometimes entail taking a step back and allowing the system to work. You don't have to repair everything yourself. Do what you can and leave the rest to people who are more qualified to manage it. I'm not sure what will happen next, with my ex-fiancé, my brother, or any of this mess. But I know one thing. Whatever happens, I will be fine. Now to the next story 5. I discovered my parents stole my $200,000 trust fund to support my sister. When I exposed them, they got furious and kicked me out of the house. To provide some context, my sister Corey has Down syndrome. She is 4 years older than me, and I've known for as long as I can remember that my sister was different from me in many ways. Even as a small child, I noted that Corey would respond strongly to every circumstance. If things didn't go her way, even in minor ways, she would scream and weep in a manner that most children did not. It was as if she couldn't take the frustration of things not living up to her expectations. Growing up, Corey had no pals. She had difficulty picking up on social cues and frequently came across as abrupt or even rude. While she wasn't trying to be impolite, her directness could be off-putting to other children who didn't comprehend her situation. As a result, many youngsters preferred to maintain their distance, leaving her feeling alienated. As a result, my parents made it a point to include me in her social life, frequently reminding me that I needed to bring her along when I went out with my friends. I realized they wanted her to feel included and have someone to interact with, so I didn't mind having my elder sister along. I felt it would be wonderful for her to have some company, and perhaps even make a few friends through my own social circles. However, spending time with Corey in the company of my friends was not easy. Her social skills were weak, and she struggled to integrate into groups. She often acted out in unexpected ways. She would occasionally push or even strike other children, especially if they had something she wanted. As a result, over time, my pals were less interested in hanging out with me if Corey was also around. They didn't want to deal with her unpredictable behavior, and I understood why. They were merely kids who wanted to play without interruptions or outbursts of hostility. Corey's impatience and inclination to lash out made things difficult for everyone, and I couldn't blame my friends for backing away from those circumstances. I understood that, as her sister, I had a responsibility to support and be there for Corey, especially given her struggles. But, to be honest, I needed space to mature, find my own friends, and live my life independently. However, my parents never let me be myself. Whenever I wanted to go something alone or spend time with my friends without Corey, they made me feel awful for even considering leaving her behind. They'd say things like, "Sisters should stick together," or "You need to think about Corey, she's your sister." It was as if they expected me to always choose her over my friends or anybody else, no matter what I wanted or needed for myself. What made things worse was that they never seemed to put these same efforts into assisting Corey comprehend how to change her conduct or develop her social skills. They never sat her down to explain why sharing or being compassionate with others could help her connect with others more effectively. Instead, they seemed to accept that I would fill in all of the gaps in her social life. So, throughout the years, I became Corey's lone buddy by default. Don't get me wrong, I adore Corey. She is family, and I recognize that none of this is her fault. I understand she confronts her own set of obstacles every day, and I can't imagine what it's like to be in her shoes. But, at the same time, do you know how it feels to be the invisible child in a family? My parents' entire world revolved around Corey, with every choice, idea, and money intended to make her life easier and more comfortable. Corey requires ongoing attention and specialized care. My parents have spent a lot of money on her numerous therapies over the years, including physiotherapy to help with her physical coordination, speech therapy to improve her communication, and occupational therapy to help her develop motor skills and independence. She also gets regular checkups, medical tests, and evaluations to track her progress and keep her health in control. The care she requires is considerable and time-consuming. While I fully grasp its significance, it frequently felt as if there was little place for me. One of Corey's specific issues is her lack of impulse control, which makes understanding boundaries difficult. For example, she is obsessed with the color pink and enjoys anything pink. She is instantly drawn to anything in that color. She feels impelled to seize it, hold it, and not let go. It doesn't matter whether it's a pink pocketbook, a teddy bear, a piece of clothes, or someone else's prized possessions. Once it's in her hands, she clings to it, and if anyone attempts to take it away, she bursts into tears, sometimes having a full-fledged breakdown. This tendency has resulted in numerous unpleasant situations, particularly while we are out in public. My parents frequently have to bargain with individuals or buy these pink trinkets from complete strangers simply to get Corey to calm down. I've seen them pay for a variety of strange pink items, some of which are worthless to us but mean everything to Corey at the time. I understand why they do it, and I understand that it's more than a wish for her. It's practically a need over which she has no control. However, watching my parents devote so much time, money, and mental energy to soothing her urges and satisfying her demands has left me feeling forgotten. Furthermore, my parents' approach to parenting Corey has had serious ramifications over the years. Their method of keeping her satisfied has devolved into what I can only describe as a shopping addiction. For Corey, it began simply enough. Every weekend, my parents would purchase her something pink. A toy, a piece of jewelry, or another trinket, to keep her happy and as a bargaining chip for her cooperation throughout the week. My parents would tell Corey that she had to be a good girl, if she wanted them to give her whatever she wanted, and she would instantly agree. What began as a temporary arrangement quickly evolved into a cherished family ritual. These purchases are not inexpensive either. Many of the goods Corey desires are one of a kind or custom-made, which frequently requires a significant investment. For a long time, I didn't think about the cost of all this pink stuff. I thought my parents could afford it. I never questioned how they could afford to continue this habit week after week, year after year. But soon, I discovered something I could not have anticipated. My parents had not been managing their expenses through regular budgeting or savings. They have been committing fraud to cover the rising prices. You see, when I was born, my grandparents established a trust fund for both me and Corey, with equal sums given to us. Corey, who has Down syndrome, was supposed to use the money for her therapies or whatever else she needed, but I was supposed to use mine for college or a down payment on a home. Only my parents had access to these funds, but my grandparents trusted them to handle them carefully. They also made certain that Corey and I were aware of these trust funds from a young age, allowing us to rely on them for financial support. It was a thoughtful present from my grandparents, and I always felt secure knowing that the trust fund would be available when the time came. When Corey reached 18, she received a portion of the trust monies. Since she still lives with and relies on my parents, they have been in charge of managing her money. They've utilized her trust fund over the years to assist pay for her treatments and therapies, which have become more demanding as she's gotten older. The money has helped with everything, from her medical treatment to providing the materials she requires for daily life. I recognized that the money was intended to meet her needs, and I never questioned how it was being spent. When I turned 18, I anticipated to get my half of the trust fund, as promised. I had previously planned to utilize the money for my college tuition. Once that was taken care of, I intended to preserve the remainder for any additional bills that would arise as I approached maturity. I had my future planned out, and I was counting on that fund to help me forge a steady route forward. But little did I know, my hopes would soon be dashed. My grandparents arranged a fantastic 18th birthday party for me last week. They had done the same for Corey when she turned 18, so I had been looking forward to my own celebration for quite some time. They had invited everyone in their family. I was genuinely pleased, surrounded by the people I cared about, and it was one of those days when everything felt just right. Following the cake cutting, my grandparents made an announcement to the entire gathering. They told me how proud they were to see me all grown up and gone to college, and that as a birthday present this year, I would receive the trust fund they had put up for me years before. The entire room erupted in cheers and clapping, with everyone praising me on this incredible gift. I felt a rush of exhilaration and thankfulness come over me as I hugged and thanked my grandparents for everything. But in the midst of all the enthusiasm, I saw that my parents were the only ones who did not appear joyful. While everyone else smiled and congratulated me, my parents seemed unconcerned. They stood off to the side, their faces strained, almost uncomfortable. I could see them exchanging glances, and while they didn't say anything, there was a discomfort to them that was difficult to miss. It struck me as peculiar, but in the excitement of the celebration, I didn't give it much thought. I wanted to enjoy the rest of the party, so I put it to the back of my mind. Later that evening, when we got home from the party, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. My parents appeared uptight and didn't speak much with me. Typically, they were concerned about Corey's health, mood, or anything she needed. But that night, Corey appeared absolutely satisfied, playing with one of her new gifts. Sensing something else was going on, I finally asked my folks if there was anything wrong. That's when my father gave me a serious look and informed me that he and my mother needed to talk to me alone. The tone of his voice immediately sent shivers down my spine. I could see it was serious. We sat together in the living room, and they exchanged troubled looks before my father began to talk. He explained, almost tentatively, that they wouldn't be able to give me my trust fund as my grandparents had planned. I didn't understand what he meant at first, so I asked him to clarify. My father continued, his voice full of shame and despair. He revealed that throughout the years, they had spent all of Corey's trust fund on her. When there was nothing left, they began to utilize the money from my trust fund, which they had access to. With a big sigh, he revealed that 90% of my trust fund was already gone, leaving little for me. I was taken aback as I considered what he had just stated. The money set aside for my future, for my education, was gone. He went on to say that the majority of money had been spent on my sister's shopping habit and the various treatments she required. As his words sank in, a numbness crept over me. My thoughts raced, attempting to figure out how this happened without my knowledge. They had raided my trust fund without informing me, to cover Corey's bills and habits. I questioned why they would do something like this to me. My parents began to justify themselves, their words laced with defensiveness. They informed me that caring for Corey had cost them a lot of money, but they had no choice but to do it. Her needs have always come first. My father discussed the never-ending expenses, the therapies, treatments, and, of course, the innumerable gifts she required every week to stay calm. I contended that they could have ceased buying her all of those items when they learned they were financially taxing. They did, however, highlight that for Corey, these goods were more than just luxuries. They were things that helped her manage and made her world a bit simpler to understand. And for them, every penny spent had been worthwhile. They couldn't simply refuse her. At that point, I felt a rush of rage fill up inside me. I questioned how they could justify spending nearly everything I had saved for my future without even speaking with me. Didn't I matter to them? My father tried to calm me down, stating that I needed to comprehend what they had been through. He discussed the stress they'd felt, the sacrifices they'd had to make as Corey's caregivers, and how difficult it was to satisfy her requirements week after week. My mother nodded, noting that Corey's condition necessitated continual care. And sometimes that meant spending money in ways that were unfair to me but were important for Corey. Both of them felt that because I didn't have any of Corey's ailments, I had an advantage over her, therefore I shouldn't be so greedy with the money. I felt a tear of frustration run down my cheek as I assured them that I wasn't doubting Corey's needs or their decision to prioritize her care. I loved her too. But this was about the lack of honesty, how they had gone behind my back and exploited what was meant to be my future without believing I deserved to know. I informed them that this trust money had been my only source of security, the one thing I felt I could rely on to start my life on my own, and it was now almost completely gone. Instead of addressing how upset and betrayed I felt, they began gaslighting me, turning the subject around on me. They expressed disappointment that I couldn't be more understanding, and that as Corey's sister, I should appreciate that sometimes sacrifices were necessary. They said, "We are all in this together." I was astounded that they wanted me to simply accept it all as a fool. To realize that Corey's needs had to come first, no questions asked. I questioned them why it was always Corey and not me. Did they not want me to do anything in my life? That's when my parents revealed a plan they had for my future, which revolved solely around taking on the task of caring for Corey. They explained that they never cared about my education because it isn't that important. They expected me to step up and help them with Corey's financial and emotional needs. My mother looked at me with a mix of pleading and resignation, saying, "You know, we're getting older, and it's exhausting looking after Corey. We won't be able to do this forever, so we need you to step in." She went on to say that they didn't mind if I went to a local college rather than the college of my choice. She only hoped I'd get a steady job as soon as I graduated so I could bring Corey to live with me. Then she said we could finally rest. Dad advised that I start contributing financially sooner, while still in college, by working a part-time job and sending money home to Corey. It would help Corey have some independence in her life, he told me, by letting her buy whatever it is that she wants and allowing her to maintain the lifestyle we've provided for her. I sat there, stunned, trying to figure out what my folks expected me to do. At that point, I felt completely misled and frustrated. This was not the future I envisioned for myself. It seemed as if my parents expected me to abandon my own aspirations and plans in order to easily transition into their role as Corey's caregiver, without ever asking what I desired for my own life. Finally, I roared at them, my voice quivering with years of accumulated rage and hurt. "Have you ever thought about what I want? Or am I just here to live for Corey? You never even thought to ask me what I wanted, did you? All these years, I've been expected to just give, and now you're pushing me to be Corey's caretaker so you can rest. How is any of this fair?" My voice trembled as the rage spilled out. "You're making decisions for me without even considering what it means for my life. I can't just drop everything for Corey and pretend like my dreams don't matter." All of my bottled up anger spilled out, years of feeling forgotten, years of being told I needed to prioritize Corey, and years of watching them pander to her every whim while I was expected to quietly support from the sidelines. My folks constantly attempt to persuade me that I shouldn't be so selfish and inconsiderate. It was as if they wanted me to conform and embrace a life I had never planned for simply because they believed it was better for Corey. So, since last week, I've been completely ignoring my parents. All I feel for them is contempt. Am I the a-hole for reporting my parents for taking my trust fund and spending it on my sister? Update 1. Wow, this post has gone viral in just a few hours. Thank you for all your advice. I am currently on my way to tell my grandparents everything. Since the trust fund was created with their money, I believe it is critical that I have their support while I confront this matter. After I've explained everything to them, I plan to let my grandparents decide what we should do next. I trust their judgment and know they will have my best interests at heart as we find out how to tackle this together. I had kept my voice shut all this time because I truly believed my folks would finally come around. However, it is evident that they have not. Update 2. It has been 2 weeks since my last update, so I told my grandparents everything. They were as astonished as I was to learn that my parents had utilized my trust fund without my authorization. That same week, my grandparents came to question my parents about what had happened to my trust fund. My grandparents had worked hard to establish the fund for both me and Corey. They were deeply committed to ensuring that we have the financial resources we require for our futures. They were understandably upset when they discovered that my parents had illegally drained the money behind their backs. My parents answered by telling them the same sob story they had shared with me. They recounted, once again, how they had been obliged to spend the money on Corey's care and therapy. They urged my grandparents to explain why they did what they did, as if their rationale would somehow make it all right. But my grandfather would have none of it. He roared at them, his voice filled with fury and amazement. He told them unequivocally that they were accountable for repaying the whole trust fund, regardless of the circumstances or justifications for its use. He was visibly angry and felt betrayed by my parents' conduct. For a moment, I hoped they'd finally accept responsibility and set things right. Then, frightened, my mother came to my grandparents and began pleading with them. She indicated that caring for Corey was difficult, and that her needs were numerous and frequent. She stated that Corey's trust money was insufficient to support the increasing costs of her treatments and ongoing bills. She rationalized taking my trust fund by claiming it helped them care for Corey. And then, in an almost horrible twist of fate, my parents turned against me. They reprimanded me for telling my grandparents everything. They were upset that I had revealed their activities and forced them to face the repercussions. My dad, in particular, was furious. He told me, with a strong edge in his voice, that I should consider myself fortunate since I was born normal, unlike Corey, and that I shouldn't despise her sister so much. It was as if my entire life, my challenges and needs, didn't matter. Everything revolved around Corey. And now I was being punished for not fitting in with the role they had chosen for me. Without thinking, I looked them in the eye and told them straight out that if they didn't give me back the money I owed, I would sue them and make sure they went to jail for their actions. I reminded them that what they did was illegal, and there was no way they could justify it in court. They couldn't prove otherwise that the trust fund was intended for me and only me. My tone was calm, but my comments were plain and firm. I could see the color drain from my parents' faces as they comprehend what I had just spoken. For the first time, I genuinely stood up for myself, and I could see the shock in their faces. They were not used to me being that straightforward. So resolute. Fortunately, my grandparents nodded in accord. They supported me because they knew I was correct. Seeing their encouragement, I persisted, speaking with greater conviction. I told my parents that it didn't matter how much they spent on Corey or what they did for her. Corey was their child, and it wasn't my obligation to give up my future for her. I loved Corey, of course, and I would always be there for her, but I wasn't going to sacrifice my own life, education, and goals just to make her feel cared for. I made it plain that I was tired of always coming second to her, of being overlooked while her needs were always prioritized. I finished by declaring I was done with them. I had had enough of being treated like the invisible child, who was expected to meekly accept whatever scraps were left for her. For the first time in my life, I stood up for myself, and I knew I could never take it back. My parents had pushed me to my limit, and I was not going to allow them to continue to dictate my life. My father instantly disagreed, his voice full of shock and anger, insisting that I couldn't threaten them with jail. He told me that as their child, I should have family loyalty and be willing to support them at all times, especially after everything they had done for me over the years. His statements were intended to make me feel guilty and to remind me of my responsibilities to them. My mother, attempting to ease the situation, even weighed in, proposing that since there was still 10% of my trust fund remaining, I could simply accept it and keep my mouth shut. It felt like they were treating me like a charity case, as if the residual crumbs from my trust fund were all I deserved and I should forget about anything else. But my granddad refused to back down. He came in, his voice stern, and informed my parents that if they didn't agree to give me back the full amount, he would get the best lawyer in town to sue them. The possibility of legal action appeared to have had a significant impact on my parents. They eventually became silent, recognizing my grandfather meant business. After a tense exchange, they reluctantly admitted that what they had done was incorrect. Nonetheless, they begged my grandparents for some time to consider things over. However, the ramifications didn't stop there. My father was furious with me for exposing them to my grandparents and threatening him and Mom with jail time. In his rage, he declared that he never wanted to see my face again. He urged me to leave his house, stating he had had enough of supporting a selfish person like me, someone who could backstab their own family, like this. When my grandparents heard this, they quickly offered to have me move in with them. They assured me that I always had a home with them and that they would help me in every way they could as I worked out my next steps. So, without hesitation, I packed my clothing, gathered my necessary documents, and moved out of my parents' house. Currently, I live with my grandparents. I hate that my parents have just kicked me out, but I'm also relieved to be away from them. I miss Corey a lot. I'm aware that what I did has permanently damaged my relationship with my family. However, I do not regret standing up for myself. Update 3. It's been a month since I last updated. After much pressure and legal threats from my grandfather, my parents finally signed an agreement drawn out by my grandfather's lawyer. The terms were easy. Because they could not repay the entire cash they had taken from me in one lump sum, they would make installments over the next 18 months. This would give them time to pay off the loan gradually, without putting a hardship on their finances all at once. However, the agreement had a vital stipulation: if they failed to make any payment by the agreed-upon date, or if they did not follow through at all, my grandparents and I had the right to initiate urgent legal action. This clause served as a safeguard, ensuring that they couldn't avoid paying me back. My folks are still unhappy with me. They blame me for everything that has happened, and it seems like they are unable to let go of their wrath or humiliation. They still don't understand why I took the actions I did and stood up for myself in such a dramatic fashion. Despite their hatred, my grandma has assured me that none of this is my fault. She told me again today that I did what I needed to do to protect myself and my future, and that I should focus on moving forward now rather than looking back. I see Corey from time to time. She misses me, and I miss her also. She frequently inquires about me, and it is evident that she is unaware of the complete picture. But she understands enough to see that something significant occurred between us. She's noticed that I'm not as present as I once was and that my parents did something to injure me. It's horrible not to be able to help her understand how bad our parents are. Regardless, I'll always be there for her. Now to the next story 6. My stepdad abandoned me in the hospital to go on vacation. I called my dad. CPS got involved when my mom tried to make me lie. Kevin, my stepfather, disgusts me. He is one of the most annoying, controlling, and disrespectful guys I've ever met. Since he married my mother, my life has been turned upside down. My parents divorced 3 years ago. Mom and dad didn't get along and fought frequently. When they announced their divorce, I wasn't surprised. They had never been a wonderful match from the beginning. They tried to make marriage work, but there was constant conflict, particularly over home obligations. Although my mother was legally a stay-at-home parent, she did not love any of the traditional household chores that come with that role. Cooking, cleaning, and even assisting me with my homework were never her top priorities, and she made no secret of her hatred for those activities. Instead, she spent the most of her time glued to her phone, attempting to grow an online following. She fancied herself a beauty influencer, often recording or publishing something, despite her modest following count. When she wasn't on her phone, she spent a lot of her time, and a good chunk of my father's money, on shopping trips, brunches, and beauty treatments. These were her regular activities. She never really fit the stereotype of a typical mother. While most parents check their children's schoolwork and ensure that they are keeping up in school, my mother's primary focus was always herself. She was preoccupied with her looks and wanted me to always be skinny and put together, as if I were a reflection of her image rather than an individual with my own needs. Following the divorce, both of my parents were granted shared custody, and my time was divided between them. It took me some time to adjust to living in 2 different families, and just as I was becoming settled, my mother met Kevin. She was smitten from their first date. They began dating officially within days, and after only a few weeks, my mother forced me to meet with him. Suddenly, this complete stranger was everywhere, and I was expected to warmly welcome him into our lives. Now, if Kevin were a great person, I wouldn't have had any problems embracing him, but he isn't. Kevin had excessive expectations from the beginning. He expected I would gladly embrace him as my new father, despite the fact that he was a complete downgrade from my biological father. He continually meddles in my life and appears to take every opportunity to mock me. Regardless of what I do, he finds a way to criticize or control me. For example, he has 2 sons, and he becomes visibly irritated anytime he believes I'm acting too girly, as he likes to put it. He has explicitly stated that I should not wear dresses or tight skirts, as if how I dress is any of his business. He also insists that I never let my hair down and that I always wear my long hair in a bun. It does not stop there. When I have friends around, he always interrupts us, claiming he's just checking in. But it's not just a brief hello or a casual query. He barges in and hovers around, as if he doesn't trust me and my friends to be alone. It's really obtrusive and, frankly, humiliating. When I complain or urge him to leave us alone, he dismisses it, stating things like, "Girls require constant supervision," and that we should just pretend he isn't even around. It's irritating that he doesn't interfere as much with his sons or feel the need to constantly monitor their movements. When I've tried to express how much this worries me to my mother, hoping for support or at least some understanding, she just dismisses it. She claims he's just being protective, as if it excuses his actions. On top of everything, Kevin's 2 sons make my life even more difficult. They have no idea of personal space, and their personalities contradict mine in every aspect. They are also relentless when it comes to bullying me. They continuously tease, mock, and find new ways to make me feel small. And instead of intervening, my mother dismisses their behavior, stating, "That's how all siblings bond." When my mother decided to marry Kevin after only a year of dating, she expected me to simply fall in line. She made it clear that she loved Kevin and was determined to make their marriage work. She knew I had reservations and frustrations, but she was clear about what she expected from me. To give Kevin a chance without making things difficult for her. She begged me to welcome him as a member of our family. It seemed like a lot to ask, especially considering how quickly everything was occurring. But I wanted to assist her while keeping the peace, so I agreed to try. Since then, I have made a genuine attempt to accept Kevin and his sons. I've tried to follow his routines and adapt to the changes, though it hasn't been easy. One of the things that upsets me the most is Kevin's insistence that I refer to him as Dad. It doesn't feel right, and every time I say it, I can't help but feel animosity rise within me. I already have a father, and I do not want to replace him. However, Kevin does not seem to realize or care that it is difficult for me. Beyond the name, what is truly upsetting is my mother's shift in focus and goals. After her marriage, she seemed to be more concerned with Kevin's sons than with me. She spends more time with them, assists them in ways she never did for me, and treats them more like a mother than she ever did for me. I sometimes feel as though I've lost my place in her life. She is simply a mother to Kevin's sons now. I'd want to live with my father, especially because he's normally more understanding. However, he had to relocate for a new job in another city, which paid him substantially more. He pays me occasional visits, but I live with my mother full-time. Dad and I also communicate on the phone frequently. He is aware of some of my concerns with Kevin and his son since I have discussed them with him. He's really supportive and has even attempted to talk to my mother about the matter. I believe he sincerely wants to assist, but whenever he brings it up, my mother shuts him off. She tells him to back off and says he shouldn't meddle with her marriage. Despite everything, I've worked hard over the years to acclimate to life with my new family. I've really tried to make an effort with Kevin and his sons, believing that if I remained patient and transparent, we could develop a nice relationship. Despite my best attempts, I continue to feel invisible within my own family. This year, Kevin was suddenly promoted at work. When he got home, he excitedly declared that he'd be taking us all on a family trip. We were all excited by the news, especially since we hadn't been on a vacation together in a long time. He and Mom chose the location and reserved tickets and lodgings for all of us. Unfortunately, just a day before our trip, I was involved in a car accident with my mother. We were heading home from shopping for some clothing for our impending vacation when another automobile smashed into us from behind. It wasn't a major collision, but it was enough to throw us off course and cause some injuries. My mother was generally fine, with a few scrapes and bruises here and there, but I wasn't that fortunate. The accident caused me to break my arm and suffer a concussion. The ambulance arrived, and I was quickly brought to the hospital. When Kevin initially learned of our accident, he rushed to the hospital, appearing concerned. At first, I assumed he was really concerned for my and my mother's well-being, and that he had come to see us. But then he kept bringing up the trip, agonizing about whether we'd still be able to travel and worried that the money he'd invested would be wasted. The physicians eventually advised us that, due to my concussion, I would need to spend a few days in the hospital for observation. They wanted to make sure I was okay before allowing me to return home, but travel was obviously out of the question for me. Kevin glanced at me, irritated, as if I was to blame for getting into the accident and wasting his money. My mother half-heartedly offered to remain with me while I was in the hospital. It gave me hope that she would choose to help me during such a tough moment. Kevin, on the other hand, was quick to respond, stating that because our plane tickets had already been purchased, we were already losing money by not going. He argued that my mother should not waste even more money by staying behind. He then turned to me and said that at my age, I should be able to stay in the hospital alone for a few days. He mentioned how safe the hospital was, with physicians and nurses available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, hinting that I had nothing to worry about. Kevin then insisted that once I was discharged, he would arrange for a babysitter to stay with me at home. I argued with Kevin that I didn't want to be alone in the hospital or have a babysitter look after me at home. I urged my mother to stay with me instead. At first, my mother tried to defend me, telling Kevin that it wasn't proper to leave me alone in the hospital. She knew it was wrong. Kevin, however, continued to push back. He insisted that my mother's presence was unneeded and that her staying would mean sitting by my side doing nothing meaningful all day. He made it appear as if her presence was pointless, entirely neglecting the emotional support she could truly offer. Kevin prioritized avoiding spending his vacation money over anything else. It was evident that he didn't consider me to be his biological child, thus he didn't care how I felt or what had happened to me. I pleaded that at 15 years old, I shouldn't be left alone in the hospital. I was terrified and in agony, and the prospect of going through this without any family members around was overwhelming. I proposed a solution, stating that Mom could contact my father to come and stay with me while she and Kevin went on their trip. Sure, it would take him some time to get here because he lived in another city, but I was confident he'd come right away if he realized I was in the hospital. I figured this would allow them to continue their vacation while keeping me company. But Kevin rejected the notion almost immediately. He ignored my concerns, calling me foolish for making such a huge deal about small injuries. He dismissed my notion of calling my father, arguing that it would just make him worry more. Kevin felt there was no need to interrupt anybody else's plans over something as minor as a concussion and a fractured arm, which he believed would mend well with a few days of hospital rest. In the end, Kevin's pressure was effective. I stared at my mother, hoping she would hold her ground and insist on staying with me. But, as usual, she caved to Kevin. Instead of battling for what I needed, she decided to go. She only stayed with me for one night, which provided some consolation. I clung to the hope that, after seeing how vulnerable I was, she would realize I needed her presence. But the next day, Kevin arrived at the hospital to bring her up, anxious to embark on the vacation as planned, without regard for how I was doing. I felt abandoned and deceived when my mother left me alone in the hospital. After only one day alone, I couldn't stop crying. One of the nurses saw me crying. When she realized I didn't have anyone nearby to check on me, she offered to phone my mother. I told her it was all right, that they would probably not respond, but she insisted. So I gave her my father's number instead. I partly expected my father to chastise me or, like Kevin, tell me that I was exaggerating and that being alone in the hospital was no big issue. But when my father answered the phone and the nurse told him about my position, he was immediately alarmed. He sounded more concerned than I had heard Dad in a long time and inquired whether my mother had truly gone on the vacation without me. I described everything, including how Kevin insisted on leaving me behind because he didn't want the trip money to go to waste, and how my mother eventually consented. My father was outraged. As I told him everything, he became silent. But I could sense his rage simmering. He then told me that my mother had just indicated that we had been in a little fender bender, downplaying the entire incident. She hadn't mentioned my fractured arm, concussion, or the fact that she and Kevin had left me alone in the hospital. According to what she told him, there was nothing to worry about, therefore he didn't feel the need to contact me. Hearing that my mother had willfully lied about my circumstances to my father made me feel even more hurt and betrayed. My father instantly told me that he will come over as soon as possible. He said he'd drop everything, drive to the hospital, and remain with me for as long as it took. For the first time since my admission, I felt relieved. Knowing that my father was on his way to be with me and that someone was finally taking my condition seriously. As I sat there waiting, I realized how much I needed this type of support in my life. Within 2 hours, my father arrived at the hospital. Seeing him enter through the door felt like a great weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I started crying as he hugged me and promised me that everything will be fine. He then went straight to my doctors, making sure he grasped every aspect of my injuries. I could see relief on his face as he affirmed that, while my injuries were severe and significant, they were not life-threatening. He genuinely regretted not being there for me sooner and not challenging my mother's version of events. He told me he regretted assuming that everything was good without personally checking in on me, and it was evident he was beating himself up over it. My father was visibly angry at Kevin. He was upset that my stepfather had the audacity to dismiss my demands and then choose to go on a trip rather than ensure my well-being. Kevin's lack of respect and concern by leaving me alone in the hospital demonstrated how little I meant to him. His behavior screamed volumes, indicating that despite being married to my mother, I was nothing more than an annoyance to him. My father tried contacting my mother and Kevin, but neither answered. This infuriated Dad even more, and he vowed that he would give Kevin and Mom a lesson for abandoning me like this. Over the next 2 nights, my father stayed by my side, having taken time from work to ensure that I was not alone. He never left me alone till I was released. Even then, he wasn't keen about me returning to Kevin's place, where I'd be left with only a babysitter until everyone returned. Instead, he insisted I accompany him home, and I consented. Once I arrived at my father's house, he attempted to contact Mom again. She claimed to have missed his previous calls since she was having so much fun with Kevin and his sons. Hearing this inflamed his rage even more, and he did not hold back. He forcefully told her that her actions were unacceptable, that abandoning me in the hospital was a major act of neglect, and that he intended to take legal action to hold her and Kevin responsible. He even mentioned taking her to court if necessary, which implies she could lose custody of me. He made it apparent that he was ready to report her and Kevin for their activities. Since then, My phone has been constantly vibrating with calls and texts from both Kevin and my mother. Instead of accepting their actions or apologizing, they've been sending messages accusing me of ruining their vacation by informing my father about my position. Kevin has even gone so far as to claim that all I had to do was keep my mouth shut and silently remain in the hospital without causing a scene. They said everything would have been okay if I had just complied. I was made to feel bad about throwing my mom and stepdad under the bus. Update 1. For everyone who is asking, now that I've had some time to think about it and spoken with my father, I know how many times Kevin and mom have neglected me over the years, and I've just let it happen. I remained silent, thinking things would change, but they never did. It's difficult to accept, yet I let myself be pushed aside for their convenience. Now, thinking back, I can't believe I put up with it for so long. For example, Kevin frequently strained my relationship with my father. He would continually make disparaging comments about him, calling him a deadbeat or a loser in comparison to him. Kevin believed my father was not a good spouse to my mother, and as a result, he felt he had the right to criticize him whenever he wanted. Mom never asked him to stop. When I experienced problems at home or tried to talk to my mother about them, Kevin always rejected my concerns. He would tell me that I was exaggerating things or that I was overly sensitive because I was a girl. He often said that this was why he was so fortunate to have only boys. Kevin consistently demonstrated preference for his sons, even in minor everyday exchanges. He was always willing to help them with their bills. But if I asked my mother for anything, Kevin would probe me with endless questions. He often accused me of buying useless items and wasting money, even though it wasn't his money. It was my father's money, therefore I should have had the freedom to spend it any way I chose. Despite living in the same house, we never had quality time together as a family. Kevin and mom would frequently make plans with his sons and exclude me, claiming they didn't want to bother me or wanted to spend quality time together without me. This often made me feel abandoned and unimportant. They'd go out to dinner or do activities they enjoyed without thinking about whether I'd want to join. This is perhaps why I was so delighted to accompany them on their vacation. They rarely engage me in their plans. Kevin and mom also do not like to celebrate my birthdays. They usually tell me that since Kevin's sons don't make a big fuss about their birthdays, I shouldn't expect much either. It's as if they assume I don't deserve particular attention simply because it's not their style. When it comes to gifts, I constantly wind up with stuff I don't like or utilize, as if they didn't think about what I genuinely appreciate. Whenever I was failing in school, Kevin would say stuff like, "You're just lazy, that's your problem, and why do you even bother with that stuff?" Instead of asking what was wrong or providing assistance, he complained about how it inconvenienced him. Mom, on the other hand, would remain mute, offering no words of comfort or support despite knowing how badly it affected me. Update 2. So, my father did report mom and Kevin to CPS. He didn't make this decision lightly, but he felt it was vital to ensure that what had occurred was not forgotten. He couldn't just sit back and let them treat me that way, abandoning me in the hospital with no second thought. When Kevin and my mother came home, they were called by CPS. They had to answer numerous questions about the situation, their behavior, and their decision to leave me. I'm sure it was a wake-up call for them, one they probably didn't expect. But the authorities agreed with my father. Leaving me behind in the hospital, especially after being injured, was unacceptable. They admitted that I had been ignored in a way that jeopardized my well-being. Later, my mother called me. She wasn't happy, and her tone indicated that she was furious with me. She told me that by involving CPS, I had gotten both her and Kevin in a lot of trouble. She seemed to be blaming me for what had happened, although I knew I had done nothing wrong. She cautioned me that CPS would be contacting me next to hear my side of the story. My mother then forcefully pressured me to lie to the authorities, warning me that if I didn't, I'd be taken away from her and she'd lose custody. I disagreed with her, telling her that I wasn't comfortable lying to the authorities and that she should have considered the repercussions of her actions before abandoning me at the hospital that day. Mom then tried to guilt-trip me, telling me that she had given me years of her life and that I needed to prove my loyalty to her this time. She made it sound like I was betraying her by being open with the authorities, as if I was to blame for everything that transpired. But what really struck me was her statement that lying would protect Kevin and his sons. She emphasized how the CPS investigation could generate complications for Kevin, particularly with his ex-wife. She warned that Kevin's ex might find out and use this as leverage to make Kevin pay for it. I just shook my head, realizing that my mother was more worried with Kevin's reputation and her own than with what I had gone through. She never inquired about my health or recovery. Meanwhile, she begged me to lie and protect her family. I couldn't stand her selfishness any longer. I kept my position and told her unequivocally that I didn't care how this affected her or Kevin. I would not lie to the authorities. I informed her that I would tell them everything that happened and that I would not be covering up anything for anyone. If this meant she and Kevin were in trouble, then so be it. They were the adults here. They were the ones who made mistakes, so I was not going to shield them from the consequences of their actions. My mother raged at me, calling me names, but I refused to give in. Update 3. It has been about 2 weeks since my previous update. I spoke to the authorities and told them the truth. For the time being, I plan to stay with my father. My father has been looking at schools so I can live with him permanently. I must admit that living with him feels good. Mom has continued to try to guilt trip me, but there is nothing further she can do at this time. She has received a warning from CPS. Mom had clearly abandoned her obligation to me, and this could not be overlooked. CPS has urged my mother to make significant adjustments, including required parenting classes and counseling, to address her neglect issues and her connection with me. Kevin was also questioned since he had demonstrated a lack of respect and concern for me, particularly following the hospital episode. CPS made it plain that they would closely watch the issue if and when I came over to stay with them. They warned that any more negligence or cruelty would result in more severe punishment. 4 months later, I can't believe it's been nearly 4 months since I lived with Dad. I feel like I'm finally in a place where I don't have to walk on eggshells or question my worth. Living with Dad has been a tremendous relief. He is encouraging, listens to me, and, most importantly, respects my space and decisions. It's been a full 180 degrees from what I was dealing with previously. I feel heard here. I can tell him about my day, my troubles, my dreams, and he actually cares. I've been able to devote more time to my studies and mental health, and I believe I'm finally returning to my true self. I've also made some wonderful new friends at school, and I truly like spending time with them. In fact, last month, for the first time in a long time, I was able to celebrate my birthday properly. I invited all of my friends over, and we ate pizza while watching corny romantic movies. It was the kind of birthday I'd always wanted but never got while living with my mother and Kevin. Mom's situation remains complex. She's been attempting to contact me more regularly recently, even texting me about how sorry she is and how much she misses me. Part of me feels bad for staying away, but then I recall everything that led me to this point. I made it apparent to her that I am still not ready to return. And, while she attempts to reach out, I have set boundaries for myself. Her acts were detrimental, and she must accept full responsibility for them. As for Kevin, he has neither apologized or taken responsibility for his conduct. Honestly, I am not surprised. He has never demonstrated genuine concern for me or my well-being. I will never forget how he treated me, especially in the hospital. I don't care whether he ever changes. I'm not waiting to find out. I've learned to rely on myself and those that genuinely care for me. And that's it. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.